what would you tell your younger self about love?
It's probably the most important thing in the world, but the most important source has to come from yourself.
Real Talk with Star Scorpio, season 7. My guest today is family. I've known him before my age was in the double digits. His aunt was married to my uncle. And the reason I say was is they both passed away within the last 3 years. He's an artist, a writer, a publisher. The funny thing is, I didn't know he was an artist until I bumped into him at my friend's art show, and I hadn't seen him in years. So I want to learn about his journey, and you all are going to learn too. Steve, welcome to Real Talk with Star Scorpio. How you doing today?
It's great. It's great to see you. It's great to be here. I can't wait to chop it up with you.
Yes, sir. I'm going to ask you a question when we get to the school talk. I'm going to have to find out something because you know some people I know. So I'm not going to ask you what school you went to yet. Just hold that down for a minute. But we know each other because we're family. But you know some people I know from public school and junior high, and I was baffled when I added you to Facebook. But on Real Talk, we like to start with the timeline. So let me know, where were you born and raised?
Born in Toronto back in 1971. Lived here all my life, but strong connections to Barbados. And so travel back and forth. And, since our families aren't that far apart in Barbados in terms of geographical as well as interpersonal relations,
Mhm.
that's how it started for me. And we've just been going back and forth since then.
Yeah. So speaking of Barbados, I don't know when the first time we actually met. I know I was, in those early ages, but it was at my aunt's house, probably. And we've been to a lot of things together. But you have a couple years on me, and my brother's 1 year younger than you or around the same age, right? But
Yeah, I think
do you
so.
remember when we met?
Oh, it's so long ago. It might have been a birthday party. It might have been in BIM. I really can't remember. The
Mhm.
memory's getting foggy.
Yeah.
But it's been so long that it just seems like we've always known each other, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't remember the first meeting, and I don't remember not knowing you, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but a lot of the occasions. So for the listeners, I think a lot of people already know my lineage. So Marita Payne, Wiggins now, right? The Wiggins family. But you were always at my aunt's house, Auntie Ina. I think that's where we saw each other a lot, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Because my dad and Ina's husband were really close. And
Yeah.
then
Wow.
obviously my mom would have been close with the Paynes because they basically grew up behind each other in terms of like where their houses were back in Barbados.
Yeah.
So I don't even know where they would have first come across each other. But
Mhm.
obviously, moving to Barbados, my parents came up here in '67.
Okay.
The community would have been really small. So you just connect with whoever you grew up with. And so it
Yeah.
was just natural, to be at Aunt Ina's and Uncle Clarence's.
Yeah, man. So just to touch on the Wiggins family for a minute, do you remember when Nick and Andrew and Mitch were young? Did you go to the
Oh
house when they
yeah,
were
yeah, yeah,
small?
yeah. I remember going to Mitch and Rita's wedding. I remember
Yes.
when they were young. And I remember that they were taller than me before I was like they weren't even fully grown yet,
I know, I know.
you know. Not that I have any height anyway.
Crazy. Me and you both, man. Me and you both. All
Yeah.
right. Um, and yo, I gotta thank you though, man, for you spoke at my uncle's funeral and you went back home for that. And that was COVID time, I believe.
Hmm.
So I don't know how many restrictions there were, but
Yeah, I
thanks for
can't
speaking at
remember.
that.
I can't remember.
Yeah. And you spoke at Auntie Grace's funeral as well.
Yeah.
So being down there was nice. Did you go to my grandmother's 100th birthday? Were you there?
No, I wasn't there for that.
The 90th?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I was ever there for any of the birthdays, but I remember her from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Um, just the nicest. Just oh, she's great.
Yeah, she passed at 106.
Yeah,
Crazy, man.
yeah, really long lived.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay,
Auntie
now,
was amazing.
yes, back to you now. So, childhood. How was your childhood growing up? Because you're an only child, right? Are you an only child?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
just me.
How was the early years for you?
I gotta say that I had a charmed childhood. My parents were great. I grew up in North York, so in the Vic Park and Finch area. For anyone who's in the six and knows where that is,
Yeah.
and it was a lot of fun. I had really good friends in school, comics, and my cousins. I had a couple of cousins who were comic book aficionados, and I kind of, would read their stash when they weren't looking. And then I started to buy my own. And it was back in the day where you could buy like 12 comics for like $2 because they were all like 25 cents.
Hmm.
And so my childhood was filled with drawing, TV, the odd video game. We would have street hockey games out, and we'd like challenge other streets. So played soccer as a kid, and then was a big sports fan. So that's basically it. And then obviously watching like early anime with like
Yeah.
Battle of the Planets or G-Force as we know it now.
Yeah, I know that I'm so happy that so many experiences we had, because I was a TV guy, right? But
Right.
that helped me when I started my comedy career because I drew on so many different things, well-rounded,
Absolutely.
playing sports and everything. I think that helped me transform into the adult that I am today with the music, the movies.
Mhm.
But there's one thing I didn't do is read a lot. So
Right.
you started young and you were collecting comics. Is that where your passion for drawing came in? I don't want to really touch on the drawing aspect yet, but is that where it came in? Because what?
Yeah, it started with that. I can't even remember what my first comic book was. I just know that I was a huge Spider-Man fan.
Yeah.
And so obviously there was the 60s cartoon that I would wake up to in the mornings, and I think it was like Saturday morning they would play it.
Yeah.
And so get up and watch that. And I always used to watch cartoons with my dad, so watch Bugs Bunny and Popeye and Mighty Mouse and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And so I think, getting back to my mom, I think my mom told me that I started drawing around the age of 3,
Oh, wow.
and it was some big headed, small bodied Spider-Man drawing,
Yeah, yeah.
no doubt.
Yeah, yeah.
So that got me into it. But then I've always liked stories.
Yeah.
So I used to watch, and being an only child and being a latchkey kid, I would come home and then I would just watch $6 Million Man and Gilligan's Island and that kind of stuff, and the
Yeah.
Batman '60s show until my parents came home, and I would just draw and keep myself busy that way. I wasn't a reader of like novels. I was an absolute comic book fan, like too many to count.
Yeah. Did you find that a lot of your friends were into the comics too?
Nah, just me.
Yeah, you
Just
know what's
me.
crazy? I'm gonna touch on our mutual friend that passed away to Lamin Martin.
Yeah.
I remember he had his big brother, Riggs, Dwayne Martin, rest in peace too. And he had his sister. He was a young one. And he started drawing young and he was like a loner. He was always in his room. And that's when he perfected his craft. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, totally. It's a
yeah.
solitary pursuit.
Mhm.
Um, you can brainstorm, like if you're writing, you can brainstorm with other people and whatnot. But as an artist, it's just time and
Yeah.
time to yourself. Hone the craft, draw, do 1,000, 10,000 bad drawings before you really become proficient. And the
Yeah.
earlier you start, the better off you are.
Do you have some of those initial drawings though?
Oh yeah, I even have behind me down there
Mhm.
some of the early comics I did. They're stapled together on like
Oh,
random pieces of paper and stuff like that. So I
yeah.
still have them. I'll pull them out once in a while and laugh at them and whatnot. But yeah, no, I haven't chucked them yet. I haven't chucked them yet. No, those were great times because I would just put on music
Mhm.
or have, especially as I got a little bit older, I would have shows like Magnum PI on in the background,
Yeah.
and I just draw.
You know
Yeah.
what's funny? Like we're older cats, right? I'm
Yeah.
49. You're how old are you now? 50,
52.
52. So we're dropping names. You're dropping names. I know what you're talking about, right? But there might be some young people that don't know Mighty Mouse, $6 Million Man, Gilligan's Island, the
the, the
classics.
the power of Google. That's all I could say. Just throw those names into YouTube
Yeah.
because those are like the stepping stones for the stuff that we're watching now.
Mm. Sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yo, you know what's crazy? I know TV's been around for a long time, but concepts, you would think that you can't get a new idea for a concept for a TV show, but the fascinating thing about TVs and movies, there's always ideas out there.
Mhm.
So when you think of the $6 Million Man and Wonder Woman, and you're like, wow, like the concept for the show is amazing. But all these years that pass, you're like, can they still come up with stuff? And then one of my favorite shows was Walking Dead.
Oh yeah,
So the
yeah, great show.
concept again, like it's amazing how you can write a story and then just go for seasons and seasons. It's like that's one of my fascinations with TV and movies, and it might be yours for too for comics because you could relate it to the same thing, I guess.
Oh, they're all related. And a lot of the things that you're watching on TV now, they have their start in comics,
In
right?
comics,
So that's
right?
that's the source material.
Hmm.
And when we were growing up, the major thing was that they didn't have the technology for a lot of the ideas.
Yeah.
So like $6 Million Man, how do you make a guy run fast? You slow down the
Yes.
camera.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And so all the Mission Impossible fans that watch Tom Cruise run all over the place,
Mhm.
the original, the OG runner was Lee Majors. Okay.
Yes.
There's like generations of kids that grew up watching this guy run across their TV screens and
Mhm.
would emulate it on the playground.
Yeah.
Right. And so you take those stories, and then creators of each generation would just build on what influenced them as kids.
Hmm.
And the ideas are out there. It all comes down to the execution,
Hmm. It's so
right? So
true.
whether you can turn it into a TV show or with self-publishing or even the technology we have now to make your own movies, you can kind of do it yourself.
Yeah. So true. And you know what's crazy? Because I wasn't into comics, it's so funny when you talk to someone that was into comics, right? They got a background in comics, and then a TV show comes out or a movie comes out. Someone like me wouldn't know it came from a comic book. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's
Right.
almost like music in the 90s, even now, when my daughter's listening to a song. She's 25 now, but when she's listening to a song and it's remixed, I'm like, yo, that's not the original. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So yeah, I didn't know
And
that.
even we weren't listening to the original,
that that's so
right?
true. Yeah.
Because we had the samples
Mhm.
from the classics that maybe our
Right.
parents might have been jamming to,
Right.
right? And now they don't even sample; they just remix it
Right.
completely differently,
Hmm.
and it more feels the vibe, right? Or the hook they might keep.
Yeah.
So it's just we're just every when we're old heads like us, we
Hmm.
think nothing new is great,
Yeah.
right? But the next gen is just taking what we did and redoing it for
Yeah.
their taste and their time. And there's some really nice stuff coming out,
Yeah.
musically as well as in all forms of entertainment.
So true. And you know, one form of music that I love that I grew up with was dancehall, right?
Mm.
And I don't know if you know this, I don't know if you like dancehall, reggae, and all that, but it's so funny when I was younger listening to the songs, and I thought they were like singing original songs, but they were singing old R&B classics. I didn't know
Yeah.
this till I was a lot older, but they sing it a lot better sometimes to me. But
Well,
anyway.
yeah, they update it, right?
Mhm.
Like they update it. It's almost like well, think of like the W Network, right?
Right.
The W Network, which is basically romance stuff or Hallmark Channel,
Mhm.
boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back, and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Those are just stories from antiquity
Mhm.
that they've just put into small town USA or small town Canada because the appeal is universal, right?
Yeah.
So this basically, I think there's like 7 core stories, and we're all just reproducing them over and over and over again through
Mhm.
time. So like when people talk about, oh, this is being rebooted,
Yeah.
usually gets rebooted in the past. At least you would reboot something after 20 years, right? Oh, we haven't seen this idea in 20 years, and then you make a
Mhm.
whole bunch of movies or product based on that. Now we reboot every 5 years, right? It's almost like
Yeah.
the attention span of the public is a lot shorter.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Wow, great insight. Before I ask you about school now, because I'm gonna want to know something here, man. It's still tripping me out. But before
Yeah.
school, you know what I really liked, what TV show I liked back in the days? The Hulk, the the original Hulk, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
David Banner,
Definitely.
right? Um, and Lou Ferrigno playing the Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
But I gotta tell you, man, when I was young, I used to watch it, Cousin Mike, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we used to go to Auntie Ina's house and Uncle Clarence back at the apartment building, we
Uh-huh.
used to go to Debbie's house, Johnny's girlfriend at the time, and she used to watch the Hulk at night,
Yes.
Friday nights. I would be so scared of that guy, man. Like
When he'd Hulk out. Yeah.
that green, like, but I found a love for it when I got older. So I
Yeah.
actually bought the DVDs of the Hulk series, and I was watching the
Mhm.
Hulk. There's something fascinating with, because I'm fascinated with muscles, right?
Right.
So seeing how big he was and what he could do is
Especially
like,
back then.
yeah, it was amazing to watch, man. But I don't know, what's your opinion on the Hulk and even the comic version too?
Well, the Hulk is one of my favorite all-time characters,
Okay,
right? So I have most of my collection is either Spider-Man or Hulk,
okay,
and that show really left a big mark on me creatively.
mhm.
And I remember watching I think it was the pilot movie when he first transforms in this rainstorm,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and I was freaked out. I was
yeah,
like, I was like ready to run. Right? It was
yeah.
it was it was it was unlike anything I think we had seen on television
Hmm.
before then, right? Because obviously you'd had like the werewolf, like and those kind of monsters,
Yeah,
and you would have those kind of changes, but the effects were different, right? Just
right.
because of the time
Hmm.
and the way that they were able to, and you learn some of the tricks of the trade later, where they had clothes pre-ripped and they would like tear it apart as he's changing,
Okay, yeah,
right, to show him getting bigger.
yeah.
But for a kid back in the 70s, that was mind blowing, right? And the stories were real. Like you look back on it now, and as a kid, you're like, oh, I want to see the Hulk. Like two
Yeah,
times or three times an episode, he'd Hulk out. But then you get older and you realize the story is really about Banner,
right.
and you connect to the humanity of Banner and
Hmm.
then what he's going through when he
Hmm.
has to, be on the run all the time. But yeah, I love the Hulk. I love, a lot of the themes in the Hulk, especially in the comic books,
Yeah.
as they kind of develop the character a little bit differently from just being scientist caught in the bomb and then transforms when he's angry to having in current times dissociative personality disorder,
Okay.
where basically every version of the Hulk, whether he's Savage Hulk or Gray Hulk, is another aspect of Banner's personality that has kind of come into being because he was abused as a kid by his dad. So a lot of these stories are really deep.
Hmm.
And then, you take aspects of sci-fi or horror or crime or true crime and you
Hmm.
put them on those themes, and that's what keeps us hooked
So
with
true.
things like the Hulk and
So true. So I think so you still like the Hulk present day with a lot of the CGI. Like I'm not talking about movies now. You
uh-huh.
okay with how
I
they
mean, like
film it now?
the technology right now is light years above what we grew up with.
Yeah.
And so basically you're not limited by the tech, you're just limited by your imagination. And
Right.
so I really enjoy the Marvel movies. I enjoy what they've done with the Hulk for the most part.
Mhm.
But in terms of like if you're like a true Hulk fan, you like to see him rampage and be the strongest
Yeah,
one
yeah.
there is,
Yeah.
you're lacking. You're not getting everything that you would actually be wanting. So I'm hoping that at some point they you know do us Hulk fans right and have
Yeah.
him be as savage as he was. Even I would say that on the TV show he was more savage.
Yeah.
In terms of like his like absolute losing it. The Hulk that we have now is just a little bit more sanitized.
Mm, okay. So are you like me where you like character development then too? I like the way this conversation is going. I'm getting back to the school in a minute, but I love character development, right? Where you get to really
Yeah.
understand the character and their background and what makes them the way they are. So I'm really talking about like I love Walking Dead, right?
Mhm.
So when you see Rick Grimes, right, in the beginning and they tell the story, but I love how they go back in time and explain things and you see things and you can see why people act that way. So character development is very important and it's good to see that story, not only about the bells and whistles that some of these superheroes and things can do, but are you into that too, that character part of the story?
Character drives everything.
Mm.
Um, and you can have great stories without special effects. It don't get me wrong, like the Walking Dead series and all the spin-offs,
Mhm.
the zombies are important, but the real monsters are the humans. that
So
haven't
right.
turned,
Right.
right?
Mm.
And it's men or persons in humanity, to fellow humans that really drives the story. And I think I reviewed The Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead for oh gosh, maybe like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And so I'm quite familiar with that storyline and the journey of Rick Grimes. I never read the comic,
Mm-hmm.
and which for me I think was a good thing because I was able to look at the TV show with fresh eyes and not be jaded by how they follow the storyline or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always about Rick's struggle to maintain uh, uh, not only the keeping his kids safe, but maintain his humanity, and then battling people like the governor or
Right.
running up against Negan, and then
Right.
even keeping the other factions within his community or communities, because they're always moving around,
Yeah.
in line, right? And then there were times where he kind of blurred it as well too,
Mm-hmm.
where you think, oh, is he the villain, right? And there's this classic thing when you're getting into character and any kind of story with conflict,
Mm-hmm.
is the villain is the hero of his
Yeah.
own journey, right? The villain
Yeah.
never thinks he's bad or she's
Yeah.
bad. And
So
so
true.
it's always interesting to see how, when you have characters like that, or in James Bond or anything like that, or the Avatar films,
Mm-hmm.
it's always character that drives everything else. And then if you have good technology and good special effects and the direction and all that kind of goes into play and mix as well,
Mm-hmm.
that's when you get absolute hits that become cultural phenomenons.
Yes. So true. Um, thanks for sharing that, man.
No
You go
worries.
deep with me, man. I love it. But let me ask you this now. I don't want to forget. I got two things to ask you though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Does it bother you if a comic, if a movie or a show strays away from the comic, the concept or the idea of the comic book, the original? Does that bother you? Or do you have to do it because it's theatrical, it's visual now?
See, that's an interesting take, because it depends how married to the source material you are,
Mm.
right? I know as a Spider-Man stan that if they do things that are outside of what my vision of Spider-Man is, then I'm kind of like, give it some side eye,
Okay.
right? But in the end, if you can make it work, like in the Sam Raimi films where the webbing came out of his wrist,
Okay.
right? He had organic webbing. If you can make it work, then fine. It depends on how much you want to tweak it. And a lot of times, you know, the people that are making the adaptations aren't necessarily comic fans to start.
Mm.
So they aren't as let's use married again to all of the source material. And they're like, well, why this doesn't make any sense? Let's change it.
Mm.
And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It totally depends. I prefer to kind of stay as close to the source material as possible, especially when you have a character that's totally established
Okay.
and you're using a story that is tried and true,
Mhm.
right? So if you went and took a story that everyone knows, and I don't know, let's just use Shakespeare as an example. He did Romeo and Juliet,
Mhm.
and you didn't hit all the beats that people are expecting in Romeo and Juliet, then people are going to be like, what am I watching?
Right.
Right. And be like, compare it to like when you're at a party and the DJ does a mix and he wants or she wants to put her own spin on the mix and it
Yeah.
doesn't hit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And you're like, you want to get off the dance floor or you want them to like get back to putting the beats back together properly. It's the
Right.
same thing. Right. You got to be able to do it, and you can change it. Doesn't mean that you have to be stuck in the past, but you just have to do it that so it works and is faithful to a degree.
Mhm.
If people are or anybody's watching it, and if they know what's going on and they go, anytime you get taken out of the narrative because of a decision,
Mhm.
whether it's the look, a motivation, even powers, or any kind of twist that you want to do, then I think that you're failing in
Right.
terms of getting across what you want to get across.
Mm. And you take that in with your personal work too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
As a writer, you write for yourself because there's a story you want to tell, but you
Mhm.
then also have to be cognizant of what the audience wants,
Yeah.
right? So if you want to tell a story that wants to provoke thought and change a paradigm, then you kick down as many doors as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But for instance, if I want to do like a James Bond story, think of all the things that makes James Bond amazing, and then just amp it up. Mm-hmm. Right? You can twist it, whatever. But that's like, for instance, I like James Bond. I love Mission Impossible, but Mission Impossible is telling better James Bond stories than the James Bond franchise right now. Right. Because Tom Cruise, he totally understands, whether you like him as a person or whatever, he understands what the audience wants. And he takes, I was actually on Twitter having a conversation with someone who runs a James Bond site or a page. And they were asking about Mission Impossible. And I said, basically, the James Bond producers are being surpassed by Cruise and his crew, because they're taking the best elements of James Bond, embracing the zaniness and the spectacle of the Roger Moore era, which a lot of people kind of look sideways at because it was so comedic.
Yeah.
But his movies had like the crazy stunts, right? Skiing off of the cliff and the British parachute comes out. Yeah. The car that turns into a submarine. Yeah. Like Cruise doesn't necessarily have that in the tech, but he's a stuntman now, right? Mm-hmm. Jumping off of like this huge ramp for the latest movie, and you're going to go see him race a motorcycle, jump off a cliff, run, with that Tom Cruise signature run, do some shooting, exactly, right?
Yeah.
And have all tension and intrigue and espionage type stuff. But when you go to Mission Impossible movie, what you're gonna get. It's kind of like Fast and Furious. Mm-hmm. You want fast cars. You want Tyrese saying something outrageous, right? And you want Dom saying it's about family. And then you get what you pay for. Sometimes it works better than other times, but you're not going to ever go look at yourself and go, what are they doing? When you get that moment, either on TV or in a film or even in a book, then you know that a wrong decision was made.
Yeah, and it's probably has been done many times in the past.
Oh, many times, because sometimes it's by committee, right? The director wants to do something, the producer says something differently, the studio comes in and has their own idea, right? And you can even see it once a movie's been made. Actors will look back on it, and there's way more access now to actors and to the movie making process than ever before. And I think Chris Hemsworth was saying that the last Thor movie was too comedic. Oh, wow. And so he wants to dial it back if he does it again and become more serious. Mm-hmm. Right. But before they went comedic, it was like, oh, we're too serious. Right. So when Kenneth Branagh, a Shakespearean director, was doing it, it was too dark and too serious, and they wanted it to be a little more lighter. So when Taika Waititi came in and did Ragnarok, it was lighter. But then they went too far. And there's always that, like, because sometimes when you're in it, you don't know.
Yeah.
So how far do you go? Right.
There has to be a balance, eh? Has to be a balance.
It has to be a balance. And it's also like this, like if you're in a band and you're on tour and you're doing, 100 dates or whatever, do you really want to play the signature song all the time? And it's a new album. You have a new album out, but they just want the greatest hits. Yeah. As that artist, you're like, oh, I'm bored. Yeah. Right. You wanna do new stuff. Of course, that helps pay for your house and your cars and stuff. Put your kids through college, but there's that balance that you have to strike when you get to that level of like, I want to be able to eat, but I also want to feed the creative beast within you.
Right. Well said, man. Well said. Okay. Before we get to school, I have to get your take on this, though. I forgot who I heard it from, but still on the Walking Dead theme here.
Yeah.
You know how Rick's group is supposed to be like a hero group, right? Mm-hmm. And when you meet Negan was probably the baddest thing I ever seen. I still have nightmares from what he did to Glenn. Like, I can't watch that, right? And you think
you're not the only one. Huh? You're not the only one. Like basically, I think looking back on when I was reviewing it and then had a chance to do some interviews with cast members, that episode changed the trajectory of the show.
Right.
Like it turned some people off because it was gruesome in the book.
Yeah.
And they were faithful to it.
Oh, wow. Are you serious?
Yeah.
I think I heard that too. You know what? Did they have to do that? Like, I'm gonna ask my question in a minute, but you're right. I'm not the only one. And you know what they did? They, the Talking Dead after the show comes on, they
Right.
had the cast on. Glenn was there. I forgot his real name, but they were there kind of to ease people, to let them know like this is not real. Remember, this is a show. But it was so well produced and well done. It felt real to me. And even though they had their trials and their hardships, like when they went to the carnivore, what do they call them? The cannibals.
Right.
When they were there, that was hard to watch too, but it didn't hit at that level with Negan. Negan really changed the trajectory in my head, and I had to like put the show on a different level now because I was so emotionally caught up in the show after all those seasons, and I was like, okay, I got to remember what I'm watching now because that was hard to watch. But yeah.
Emotional investment, right?
Mhm.
Like they hooked you. Like I remember I saw the first season and I was like, okay, it's fine. And then I didn't watch it until they reached out and wanted me to do reviews for my site,
Okay.
right?
Mhm.
And then I started to get into it. And then as a writer, I'm like, okay, I'm deconstructing all of these episodes, and you're realizing, okay, you're having an emotional attachment to certain characters, right?
Yeah.
And then depending on how well they're written, because the Maggie Glenn relationship
Yeah.
was solid, and
Mhm.
then the actors had great chemistry, so
Mhm.
you bought it. And
Right.
then even though you knew it was coming, if you knew the comic books,
Yeah.
when Negan went to town on Glenn, that is one of those ones where you as a viewer are almost in the group at the same time,
Mm.
right? So you're losing a fan favorite.
Yeah.
And if you're not up for the gore, and this is a show where, people are getting pieces of themselves bitten
Yeah. Yeah.
off of them on the regular, and
Mhm.
zombie body parts are falling off.
Mhm.
But when you see it to someone that you're totally invested in as a character and is like an OG,
Yeah.
it totally changes how you can look at what comes next,
Mhm.
right?
So true, man. Okay, now this question though. Someone that I was watching, it was probably on Talking Dead. I want your take on this. So Rick's group is supposed to be the hero group. Negan was bad, right? Evil. But someone was saying if you watch the story from Negan's perspective from the beginning, you would think of it a different way. And if he bumped into Rick Grimes' group, you might say, hey, who are these guys? These guys are the bad guys. And Negan's group's just surviving because of what they've been through. What's your take on that?
As I mentioned earlier,
Hmm.
that observation is absolutely correct. The villain is the hero of his own journey,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So when you look back, and one of their best episodes was the episode where they went basically Negan's origin,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And there was a humanity there, and he's a teacher, right?
Hmm.
And you see what happened to his wife.
Hmm.
You can understand where you start at one point, and then it's kind of kill or be killed, and for for you to survive in that kind of an environment,
Hmm.
you have to make certain decisions. And you can kind of see it that if you stick to certain ideals, if you run across the wrong person, you're done.
Right.
And that's one of the biggest things, I guess, like you can go towards Batman and the Joker, where you say you're like your two sides of the same coin.
Hmm.
But Batman really could eliminate the Joker, but he has a code that he won't go against, right?
Hmm.
So looking at Negan and Rick, they had a lot of conversations where basically they were having like that conversation. I don't know if you ever watched the movie Heat, where
Oh,
De
that's,
Niro's
that's
character
one of my favorite movies.
and Pacino's character are sitting down in the
Hmm.
diner and are basically talking,
Yeah.
and they're basically having a conversation, and it's one point of view versus another point of view. I
Hmm.
got to do what I got to do. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens,
Hmm.
right? And it's the same thing with Nick and with Rick and Negan,
Hmm.
because Negan, if he's not as much of a hard ass, then he can't control his group, and he doesn't ever want to be underneath someone's foot or underneath someone's boot,
Right.
right? And it's no different than anyone else's journey growing up, right? You start in a job and you're, kind of green or whatever. You're like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And then you get to, you get off probation or whatever it is in your job. And you're like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's crazy. You want to go kick your boss or whatever.
Yeah.
You are completely different, right?
Mhm.
You look at athletes, and in their rookie season, they are one way.
Right.
And then when they become a grizzled vet, right? Completely different.
Mhm.
They approach their nutrition differently. They approach game day differently. Between the whistles, they are maybe rougher than they were as a rookie
Mhm.
because they realize that I need this space in the paint and I gotta
Mhm.
fight for it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And the environment kind of dictates how you behave, right? So if you're in a rough environment and you want to play, elbows up, then you got to be able to handle elbows up. But if you're not, if the game's not called that way, then you adjust,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I like that analogy. Good. I'm glad you touched on that because I always want to hear someone else's perspective. Because when I heard it, it was someone from the Talking Dead, and I'm like, I gotta ask somebody about it, right? And now you put some light on it, you shed some light on it. Okay, now school, Steve. Before I ask what school you went to, I hope I'm right. I'm gonna drop some names to you, and I got them off your Facebook because we have mutual friends, right? But
Yeah.
we're old, so our memories are going away. But if I drop these names, I gotta see if you know them. But the last one I'm gonna drop, I feel like you're close to him for a reason. I don't know. But if I said to you, I gotta read this. Do you remember a guy named Kwame?
Okay. Kwame, he is my brother, man. I
Wow.
love that guy. I love that guy. We've known each other forever. We went to the same high school.
Right. Don't say the school yet. Hold on, right?
Don't say the school, but he and I have always shared a love of comics,
Hmm.
and he's done some stuff for my website and YouTube channel.
Hmm.
And then we, had the great fortune of working on one of his documentaries. Like he's a fantastic documentary filmmaker.
Yeah.
Um, just he's amazing. I love
Hmm.
that guy.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask your high school in a minute. I'm gonna drop a couple more names, but it's so crazy because I went to a school called Brookbanks, then I
Mhm.
went to Donview Junior High, then I went to
I think
Victoria
that's where you
Park.
that's where you met my cousin Courtney, right?
Yes,
Right.
yes. So this is what I want to know. Um, you lived in the area, but not because you said I grew up Victoria Park and Ellesmere, parents still there, whatever, right?
Yeah, you're
But
north of me. You were north.
yeah,
I was north of you. Sorry, because I was at Vic Park and Finch.
yes.
Yeah.
So first of all, what public school did you go to?
I went to Cherokee Public School.
So Cherokee, I know Cherokee there. That
Yeah,
area is changing, man. It's crazy.
completely
Yeah.
changing.
Okay. And then what junior high did you go to?
I went to Pleasant View Junior High,
Okay, Pleasant View. That's right down the street. Yeah, I know that the area. Okay.
near the famous Johnny Burgers.
Yes, Johnny's man.
Yeah, man.
Best. Okay. Now forget the high school for a minute. I'm gonna drop another name. I don't know if you know her still. I went to public school with her, junior high,
Uh-huh.
Jenny Kwan.
Oh my God, yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Another name,
Yeah, yeah.
Ryan Xavier. Ryan.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Went to high
Yeah.
school though.
Okay. So our rival teams, don't say the school yet. Vic Park played your school because I believe you went to the school. So we were rivals in volleyball.
Mm-hmm.
Wayne Poundon.
Yep.
Jesus Christ. Okay. The last name I'm
Well, I
gonna
think I
drop.
think Wayne and I are born on the same day, actually.
Are you serious?
I think we share a birthday.
Wow. Him and my brother were friends. This is so weird, man. But him and my brothers were friends, and then we didn't know this, man. The last name I'm gonna drop though is Nick. Nick Fortress.
Star Wars Nick.
Jeez, man.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. Nick is amazing. You wanted to talk Star Wars? That's
Yeah.
the guy you need to talk to.
Yo, so
He's the biggest Star Wars stan ever.
I'm confused here. Cause Nick went to Vic Park. So say the school you went to now. What high school?
Georges Henry.
You went to Georges Henry.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's crazy is when we were in Donview, there was a split. So a lot of us went to VP,
Hmm.
and then Georges was known as that smart school, right?
It,
Academics,
it
right?
was it was funny because the year I got there,
Yeah.
they kind of rebooted it and turned it into an academy.
Academy. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It was just branding, really.
Yeah.
And I think they changed the school colors and they brought in all like different gear. So they went, I think they were green, brown, and gold, and they went to
Yeah.
black, red, and white.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I know that I was considered out of area. A lot of the crew that I came in with to Henry
Right.
were considered out of area. We were supposed to go to like A.Y. Jackson or McDonald, Sir John A.
Johnny
McDonald.
McDonald. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but Henry, for some reason, I can't even tell you why we chose to go there. And we could have gone to Vanier too.
Sure, just Vanny. Oh, that wasn't a good school back in the day, man. That was a rough school.
Vanier was rough.
Yeah.
Vanier was a rough school, and that
Mhm.
might have been like my mom and I'm like, "What?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
going there, right?" So and we had to like take a couple of buses to get to Henry.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
It's
but
located in it's in the
on
back.
Graydon Hall,
Yeah,
it's like
Great
in the
Hall.
back of some apartments on a hill near
Yeah.
the PvP.
Crazy.
But it was a great place to go to high school.
Mhm.
Some lifelong friends I've met there, still with them. They're still buddies. And um, yeah, it was funny because the people that you've mentioned, not
Yeah.
all of them went to high school with me,
Yeah.
but I know a couple of guys and gals that went to both schools, and I'm
Okay.
still tight
Mhm.
with the Vic Park crew as well
Yeah.
as the Henry crew.
That's crazy. So we're practically family, and I didn't know that you know some of the same people. But
Uh-huh.
Nick is a friend from Brookbanks days, like public school, junior high, high school. He played football.
Yes, he
Like,
did. And I was heartbroken because I always wanted to play football, but every time I went to another school,
yeah,
Pleasant View, they canceled it because of insurance. Then I went to Henry, I want to play football,
yeah,
canceled it because of insurance. And I'm just looking at the equipment, you know. So
yeah.
played, I think we played flag football or something.
Mm.
But the only rivalry that I had with Vic Park was I played baseball in high school.
Okay. Mm.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask that now. So since we're on school now, academics, what did you excel in? And since you started drawing from when you were young, I want to know if art class you took advantage of the art class, the teachers there, and then in sports you said you played baseball. But yeah, academic wise, how was that for you?
I was more of an English guy.
Mm.
I liked science, I liked biology. I had some great teachers. Some teachers to this day that you know you get some chuckles over
Yeah,
at Pleasant View as well too, right?
yeah.
Some teachers that really helped kind of forge you as a young individual.
Mhm.
And I would say I liked art a lot, but I actually didn't take a lot of art,
Oh,
right?
okay. Mm.
um because you know growing up with West Indian parents, they're kind of like you're gonna be this,
Yeah, yeah,
right? There is no free will.
yeah. That's West Indian.
Yeah. So I didn't do a lot of art. I did most of my art. I was like basically self-taught. So I'd come home and instead of doing homework, I would draw.
Mm, okay, okay.
And but I enjoyed things like English. I wasn't. It's kind of weird because I didn't do theater,
Mhm.
although I'm not sure why, but I didn't do theater. And now as like you know as an old man, I'm doing
Yeah,
stunts in films and you know doing extra work in films. So it's kind
yeah.
of weird how you end up where you probably should be in the first place.
Yes, yes. We're gonna get to that too, man. I want to know about
Yeah.
that. It was like, okay. Yeah, so that's school now. Did you go to post-secondary? What did you do after high school?
I went to Scarborough campus, U of T,
U of T. Okay.
and I did English.
Mhm.
I think I did a minor in philosophy. I can't, not sure if that's correct. And then I went to teachers college after that.
Okay. And now, so let's get into that now. One thing I like to ask people, I'm gonna ask it in a different way, man. So teachers college. So a number of years you taught. So work life versus your passion, which equals balancing your reality versus your dreams, I kind of say. So how was that? Did you always now do your art on the side? Because we're going to get into your company later, but did you always do it on the side while you were teaching? And how was your teaching experience?
Um, yeah, I did actually. I had the fortune of meeting an artist. I think my mom knew his mom. His name is Ken Lashley, and he was drawing for Marvel at the time. So this is like early '90s,
Okay.
and he was drawing. a book called Excalibur, which is part of the X group of books, so X-Men and Alpha Flight and all that kind of stuff. And so he and I struck up a pretty good relationship and friendship, and he started a studio called Draxall Jump. And so while I was teaching, I would work there, a couple of days a week, helping out with toy designs or whatever needed to be done. And then in the summers, I would work there. So when we were doing comic book work, like working on things like I think it was Legends of the DC Universe and some other books, I would help do some of the background stuff or do some character work or whatever, or help with designs or help with coloring. So I was kind of like jack of all trades.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of like the best kind of experience that I had, because it was learning the business without having kind of like the school aspect of it.
Yeah.
Where sometimes you like those kind of institutions have a certain path for you.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens in any school, where you don't necessarily learn all of the tricks of the trade until you're in
Right.
it.
Right.
Happened in teachers college too, where like, for instance, you would learn about pedagogy and all that kind of stuff, but you don't learn how to run your class in the morning
Right.
in terms of like collecting forms and all that kind of stuff. So like the kind of stuff that gets you from lesson to lesson,
Mm-hmm.
they don't teach you that. You learn that when you're on the job with your placement, right? And so Draxall for me was probably, I don't even know how long I was there, 5-6 years, maybe longer than that, before everything kind of fell apart. But it was a great experience. And so I was teaching and drawing at the same time, and going to conventions, going to San Diego. And so I learned a lot about the business at Draxall, good and the bad.
Mm-hmm.
Have some lifelong friends because of the experience. And it's also put me to where I am today. So and I remember my father, before he passed, he was sick with cancer, and he looked at me, because I always wanted to go to OCAD and I want to draw comic books from like high school time.
Yeah.
Right. And this is even back when I knew Kwame. He was a huge Batman fan, and I was a huge Spider-Man fan. So we would always have these conversations. And my father looked at me and he's like, are you mad at us? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking about him and my mom. And I asked him for what. And he said that we didn't let you go to become an artist, that you didn't, just couldn't draw from the beginning. And I was already a teacher at this point. And I said, Dad, there are no starving teachers. Right. But they're starving artists. And the beauty of teaching is there's enough flexibility that you can do. A lot of teachers have side hustles, right? And then you have because the nature of that job, it is so draining that you kind of need the 2 months off.
Yeah.
Because the 2 weeks after the end of the year, you're kind of recovering. You feel great for a couple of weeks, and then you got to get ramped up again for September. But because of the way that I worked, and I'm a night owl, I can kind of get my teaching stuff done, do some art, and then get a little bit of sleep, and then head to work. And that's what I did. I did that grind for probably about 20 years, 22 years. That's how long I taught. And I drew for most of it, if not all of it.
And you still have those connections, right? You never lost those connections.
Teaching and Draxall and art.
So Draxall, the gentleman I forgot the gentleman's name that you mentioned.
Oh, Ken Lashley. Ken Lashley and I, we see each other at conventions.
Yeah.
But some of the other guys in the crew, Christian Zanier, Greg Parkin, Marvin Mariano, we still see each other and still work together. Actually, Hugh Rookwood, he's a fantastic artist. That's a guy you should talk to. He is my Yoda when it comes to getting into the art scene as a solo artist and going on my own. So I would spend time at conventions. This is after things had kind of broken down with Draxall. I was teaching, I had a family, and I would go to conventions with him, sit at his table, and I would just watch him work. And then when I got my legs underneath me in terms of how to do it, after his following his lead, then I went out on my own. But those guys are my brothers. I can call them up anytime. We chat, we could talk about how bad the movies are or how good the movies are. And then talk about the state of the industry. And sometimes we connect each other for work, right? So if there's a project that I can't work on, let them know. And if there's a project that they think I can work on, vice versa.
Nice. Yeah, it's good to have those connections. And I like that you touched on I call it like, we always hear hands-on
Yeah.
learning. You know what I mean? You got your school learning books, but your hands-on learning is the best because I related to comedy when I got into stand-up. This guy, Mr. Mo, he was on Cable 10 on the Buzz Show, and I forgot where I met him. But we started talking, and he said, "Yeah, just put your name on the list on Yuck Yucks and go on amateur night." And then when I actually got into it, I learned that there was Humber College teaching a course, right? But I'm like, I'm sure you can teach someone how to be funny. And when I mean that, when I'm saying that, I mean like the structuring of a joke, right?
Mm-hmm.
The beginning, the
Mm-hmm.
punch, the end, and all this stuff, and how to organize your joke. But to actually be funny, I believe that's innate and it's natural in a lot of comedians
Yeah.
that we know, right?
Yeah.
So when he told me just to go to a show and I did it, like I put my name on the list, got on Yuck Yucks, I made some jokes, right? But there's nothing like that experience because you get to see the reaction of the crowd. And when you're telling your jokes, you see what they're laughing at and what hit and what doesn't. So that experience is the best for, I think, a lot of different industries and professions, right? Just you got to get out there and do it. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, there's definitely a technical aspect to everything,
Mhm.
but it's reps. Like you need reps. There was a clip I saw recently on Instagram, and I think it was Kobe Bryant, the late great Kobe Bryant, talking about um what makes you a great basketball player,
Mhm.
right? And he said you just gotta be out there every day, 2-3 hours every day, working on your handles, all that kind of stuff. If you just go a couple of times a week, then you're not going to progress to the nature and the level that you need to get to.
Mhm.
And so if you can do that, get your hands dirty, learn some of the technical aspects of things, right? Because like you can learn how to draw something, you can learn how to tell a joke, right? It's
Mhm.
beats. You can learn how to write a script if you just follow templates.
Mhm.
But there's an innate kind of energy that if you have it, then you can take whatever the rules are, bend them to your will,
Yeah.
and you come up with either a fantastic joke or a fantastic set, a really great story, a particular way of playing, right? Basketball or hockey or whatever, because you have to bring what's inside of you and what's informed you
Mhm.
to whatever you're doing,
So true. So
right?
true. Okay. Now, with art, so what, how do I ask this question? The type of drawings, are you fantasy? What do I say? How am I supposed to ask this question, man?
No, it's a good question.
Mm.
I'll just answer the question without you asking me.
Okay.
The art that I love, it's comic book style art.
Okay.
So the masters like John Romita Sr., who just passed, his son John Romita Jr.,
Mhm.
John Byrne, George Perez. These are artists from Neil Adams, who I had the pleasure of meeting. I met John Romita Sr. as well too on the convention circuit,
Mhm.
and Lamin would have met some of them too, or at least been in their orbit at the conventions.
Yeah.
That kind of art, so like kind of like a pop art,
Okay.
is my favorite. But I love manga. I love fantasy art. Right? It's just the expressions of what comes out of the artist's mind and onto the page
Mhm.
that I learn a little bit from. Right? But most of the art that I own is comic book art
Yeah.
in those books. Right? So that's what informs me in terms of how I draw.
Mhm.
So I'm not a painter. Like I can color on the computer, but I'm not a painter by trade.
White trait. Yeah.
And that's not how I see things. But I'm always willing to learn. So you
Yeah.
never know.
So it's funny that you say that because when Lamin started drawing and then he was drawing on, I think he was using whatever software he was using.
Yeah.
But then he was outsourcing his friend, I guess, to color it. But then he
Mm-hmm.
learned himself and he
Right.
started doing everything himself, man. I admire that. But it's a lot of work too, though.
It
So
is. And
mhm.
Lamin, I can say this without even batting an eyelash. He was the most talented artist I've ever been around. That he had more talent in two fingers that I have my whole body. Like just hit the execution, the vision, everything. And you talk about the nicest, most humble individual.
Mhm.
You wouldn't think that he was such a powerhouse. And we would, I think I had the pleasure of, I think it was in Vancouver, of just because I think we roomed together in Vancouver, and just a great guy. I miss him. I miss him to this day. And yeah, like you look you look at what he was doing, either his line work and then how he would paint it digitally afterwards. And you're like, oh, that's an interesting way of looking at that. Or oh, you look at his line work, and then you can incorporate that a little bit into yours. At least look at his process, right? And
Mhm.
we're all learning from each other, right? Learning from the greats, whether they're contemporaries or people who have come in the past. And then sometimes you look across the ocean and you incorporate some of what is going on in anime and manga, right?
Mhm.
It's all part of the same community, right? It's just what works for you to help make your style. Because like, let's look at the Joker,
Mhm.
right? And the way he plays basketball. He plays basketball in a way that is so different to what we're used to. People have a hard time looking at his greatness because can't jump, can't jump,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. But man, his vision is crazy, right? And then he ends up setting records. He wins a chip. And all he does is he gets the job done in the way that he knows how to do it and helps elevate his teammates.
Mhm.
Like any kind of skill, it's that flair that you bring from what's within you, right? Like no one writes like Aaron Sorkin. Sorkin has a way with words, right? No one delivers a line like Meryl Streep or Denzel, right?
Mhm.
That's them. You can you can kind of emulate it, right? You can kind of try to uh, grab a little bit of the stardust, and that will inform you and what you produce, right? But you got to take how you see things and how you can execute it based on your limitations, as
Mhm.
well as what is an asset for you, and then produce what needs to be produced. If Luca tried to be Shaq, or if he tried to be, I don't know, Hakeem Olajuwon, he would not be who he was and would not be successful.
Yeah.
Right. But in the end, all that it comes down to is hard work. If
Mhm.
you work hard and you dedicate yourself to whatever your craft is, chances are to work out.
I believe that, man. I believe that. Um, so you went to a lot of shows, and you met Lamin at a show originally, or just from the comic world?
I think I might have met him at Fan Expo here in Toronto.
Okay, Fan Expo. Okay.
Right. Either that or he might have been at Gotham Comics in Mississauga. It might have been like an artist fest or something.
Mhm.
And then we had a chat. I think we had a chat and he mentioned that he went to Vic Park. And then I said, do you know my cousin? I mentioned you. He goes, yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, the world is so small.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So obviously then the friendship blossomed from there.
Mhm.
And yeah, the shows basically when you like they're all over the place. So you can go
Mhm.
to shows in the States, you can go to a lot of shows here in Canada, and you become like a carny, essentially. So it's like you're there for the weekend, you do your stuff, you set up your booth, you meet and greet people, you know, do some business, and then you pack up, and then you're somewhere else a couple of weeks later,
Mhm.
if that's the show you want to go to.
The grind, man. The grind of the art world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you went to conventions, you do all these things, you're drawing. I met you at after a long time at one of Lamin's art shows where he's selling his, I guess you
Yes.
call it commissioned work. I don't know, it's just
Yeah.
commissioned work. So for you, what have you published, and do you also dabble in that commission work, like selling pieces too? Before we get
Yeah.
into your company.
Yeah. So I have self-published and I did it through my company. It was kind of one of those things where this is back in 2014.
Mhm.
Uh I had left Draxall had broken apart and we were all kind of on our own. And then with Huey, I had gone to a couple of shows and was on the circuit. And I was like, you know what? I can do this. And then around that time, Amazon KDP had come into um, vogue, where you could publish your own stuff.
Was that Kindle publish? Are you talking about
Yeah,
Amazon
Kindle
what?
Direct Publishing.
Kindle Direct Publishing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Create Space was another one. And I'm not sure if Create Space became Kindle Direct Publishing. I'm not sure,
Hmm.
but I published two books. Um, One's called Chronocari Alpha, and Time is Relative, and then another one's called Edge, Eastwind, and Paradise. And those one was a kid's book based on like superheroes who can kind of control time, and the other one was a reimagining of a novel that my uncle had written back in '81.
Oh wow.
So this is Aunt Grace's oldest brother,
Okay.
Carl Jackson. He wrote a book in '81 with this character called Shannon Edge, and
Mhm.
he was kind of like a Barbadian secret agent,
Oh,
right?
really?
So I
Yeah.
was 81, so I would have been 10. So I read this book, and it's probably too advanced for me with all the themes and subject matter, but
Mhm.
I fell in love. Like West Indian James Bond, Bajan, bring it. I want more. And I was always bugging him to be like,
Mhm.
can you do another book? But he was a diplomat and busy, and he never did get around to publishing a second one. And
Mhm.
so on my journey, I was like, maybe I should do another Edge novel, because he's already got one out there. So before he passed, I went down there and hung out with him a couple of summers, and we wrote together.
Wow.
And
Okay.
he showed me the ropes, and we would discuss and brainstorm. And that's one of the best parts of writing, is being quote unquote like in a writer's room where you're just spitballing and throwing ideas around.
Mhm.
So he kind of gave me some pearls of wisdom, kind of like never throw out an idea, right? Even if it's a bad one, put it to the
Mhm.
side. Don't say,
Yeah.
this is crap or whatever,
Mhm.
because you might be able to use it later or for another project. And
Wow.
so with KDP, I was able to take those two books and publish them. And so they're up on Amazon. And
Mhm.
then I would take those books and go to conventions and sell them,
Okay.
right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so the artwork that was in the Chronocari book, which was about the kids who could control time, I would have prints, and then I would do fan art or do commissions while I'm there. So the one of the best stories that still to this day makes me laugh is, and I had no name, because I think it was my first time in Vancouver,
Mhm.
and this lady came up with her boyfriend, and there's things called blank covers. So they're comics that have a blank cover, just have the title, and it
Mhm.
was a Star Wars blank cover. And I don't even think I had drawn any Star Wars characters that weekend.
Yeah.
But she comes up to me and she goes, "Oh, I like your stuff. Can you I'm going to commission a cover for you." So I'm like, "From you." I'm like, "Okay, great." And she's like, "Could you draw like anything from Star Wars?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, sure." So then she goes, "All right, I'll be back." So she comes back, and the cover is already signed by Carrie Fisher.
No.
So
Jeez.
I'm looking at this and I'm like, "So you want me to draw Princess Leia on this
Yeah.
when you have her signature?" She goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, yeah, totally." I'm like, "All right."
Mhm.
Went ahead, did it. She loved it. And that's my the closest connection I'll get to being in the Star Wars universe, other than working on some of the toys
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
stuff. But to have Carrie Fisher's signature on a piece of artwork that I did,
Mhm.
that to me is was pretty cool.
Wow. I when I get to one of these questions, I'm gonna see. Sometimes I think things happen for a reason. I believe I know which card you're gonna pick when I do the Star Scorpio choice, and I
Okay.
just want to see what your answer is gonna be. But that's one of the moments in life that you remember. Is there anything else that you were in awe of when you went to one of these shows? Because these conventions, people like you had your podcast too. We'll talk about that. But people from these shows or comic, they come to the show from wrestling, all these different
Oh yeah.
professions. Who have you met, and were you ever in awe of who you met because you've known about them since you were a kid?
Ooh, I've met a lot. I've met a
Oh,
lot. And the um the cool thing is that a lot of them are really nice.
Oh,
You
okay.
know how they say don't meet your
You'll
heroes,
be your heroes. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
A lot of them are really nice. You
Mhm.
know, I didn't have the chance of meeting Stanley, but I was like a couple of feet from him.
In the vicinity of
I was in the
Stan Lee.
vicinity. Yeah. So I think it was Stanley and John Romita Sr. This was
Yeah.
in San Diego. This is years ago. This was like talking like 2001, maybe even like late 90s.
Yeah.
And that was really cool. Talking to Neil Adams, who basically redefined Batman with
Mhm.
Denny O'Neil in the late 60s, early 70s, and helped create characters like Ra's al Ghul and stuff like that.
Mhm.
He basically was the definitive Batman. Meeting him, interviewing him, learning about the business and some of his trials and tribulations in it. Um, Talking about to him about John Stewart, who's the Black Green Lantern,
Okay.
right?
Mhm.
Um, Talking to him about the artists fund, where basically they would support artists who would be down on their luck
Yeah.
or be in financial difficulty, and raising money for them. Meeting George Perez was fantastic. So
Wow.
George Perez passed away not too long ago.
Yeah.
The comic book industry, a lot of the elder statesmen, a lot of the giants
Mhm.
have passed away recently. And so I met him in Niagara Falls and had a chance to express to him that his book, Teen Titans, in early 80s, sorry, with
Mhm.
Marv Wolfman, was one of the books that really got me hooked into comics. I was totally into that series.
Yeah.
So meeting them, talking to people like Dave Finch, who's a fellow Canadian artist,
Okay.
fantastic artist. Um, Interviewing Mark Silvestri, who was a co-founder of Image. Those are all some nice people that and experiences that I've had where you run across some of the people that help inspire you,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then obviously getting a book signed by John Romita Sr. and having a
Mhm.
chance to chat with him for a little bit and just let
Amazing.
them know that you have inspired me and I really love your work. Yeah, there's
Mhm.
nothing better.
Amazing. Amazing. Um, at this point now, I'm gonna ask you this question, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a would you rather question. So far, thanks for sharing everything you did to this point, man. This is a great conversation.
No, I'm having a great time. This is awesome.
Mhm. Now, would you rather? Would you rather visit your younger self and give them advice for the future? Or would you rather visit your older self and have them give you advice for what's going on right now?
Ooh. Hmm. That's an awesome question. It's an awesome question. Hmm. You know what? Maybe my younger self. Maybe my younger self, because there's certain, and you know exactly where I'm going with when I say it. There's certain things that you encounter as a kid, or maybe even as a young man, or even as a person who's not that much younger than we are now, because you're always learning, right? But there's certain things that when you see it, you realize, you know what, more patience was needed,
Mhm.
right? Don't be so hasty to make that mistake,
Mhm.
because some people make one mistake and that's it, and then there's some people that make tons of mistake and it's like Teflon, right? Nothing happens to them. But sometimes I think that a lot of the decisions we make are more emotional than they are analytical.
Mhm.
And if you it, I would probably tell my younger self, and I'm pretty patient anyway, but I would tell my younger self, always play the long game. And that doesn't mean stay in a position where you're going to be taken advantage of or something's bad. Like, always read the tea leaves, but always be analytical in terms of, like, if this is the course of action I'm taking, where's it going to lead me?
Mhm.
Right. So spontaneity, I'm totally into that, but be spontaneous with a safety net. Like, bet on yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like, I bet on myself even now because I'm not in the profession that I started in,
Mhm.
right? but it wasn't a rash decision. It was like an overnight, you know how they say overnight success takes 10 years kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was one of those ones where it's like, you know, I think I can go this way. And people might look at you and go, are you nuts? Right. But that's because you've kind of checked all the boxes in terms of like what you think you need to do to be prepared for the situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go back. I would
Wow.
go back.
I love asking that question. And again, now get another perspective from someone else too. Wow. This is crazy. I remember, I don't know if it was a couple guests that I had that said they wouldn't do either. And then I
Mm.
get some that for sure wouldn't go to the older self because they want to go on the path. They don't want to know, what's going
Right.
on. But I get a lot of people saying their younger self.
Yeah.
And it's mostly around lessons, like just lessons in life that, to be aware of
Yeah. And I'm
and
not
trust.
talking like, I'm not saying like buy Apple stock in 1997 or buy Bitcoin in 98. I'm not saying like that kind of stuff. It's
Yeah.
more just like, you know, when you get older, for the most part, you're a little bit wiser,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And they're just like going forward is one thing, right? Because when you go back, you're always going to change the timeline, no matter what you do,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But I don't necessarily want to know what my end journey is just yet. Like
Yeah.
part of the fun of living is finding out what comes next. So I don't need to see old me,
Mhm.
but young me, just to impart that wisdom
Yeah.
in terms of like just take it, because here's the thing, right? Like we're really lucky that we've got people in our family and have had people in our family that are incredibly wise, right? So you will talk to them if you have the chance, or certain things come up, or you go through some deaths or whatever, and then you have a chance to be really real
Mhm.
and reflective, and then they might tell you something, and you're like, and it's kind of unfortunate sometimes it takes being at a funeral or loss
Yeah.
to open those doors to your mind. But if you are your own elder statesman giving that advice, I think that's
Mhm.
probably the best thing to do, because who knows you better.
Right. So true. Well said, Steve. Well said. Okay. Now, whether my guest chose younger or older, these next four questions is about the younger self.
Okay.
What would you tell your younger self about money?
Have it, but don't be a slave to it.
Nice.
Yeah.
What would you tell your younger self about friends?
Hmm. Watch how they treat other people. Because I'm telling you, and that comes to like whether it's you choose a significant other as a partner, as a life partner, or whatever, business partner, just see how they treat other people, especially when things aren't going well for them.
Mhm.
Because then you know something coming for you at some point.
So true.
Yeah.
Next,
Yeah.
what would you tell your younger self about family?
You can't choose them.
Hmm. And lastly, what would you tell your younger self about love?
It's probably the most important thing in the world, but the most important source has to come from yourself. So the one thing, like I'll thank my parents. I didn't thank them for this when I was younger, right? But I thank them for it now. They were hard. They were like pretty tough. They emigrated to a new country. No one looks like them, forging what they think would be a better life. And so they didn't want me to kind of have any hardships.
Mhm.
So they were pretty tough in terms of like, their expectations, right? And you look back on it now, and the one thing they taught me was that as long as I knew that I was working hard and that I put in a good effort, whatever the outcome, I could be satisfied.
Mhm.
Because you're always going to disappoint somebody. I was having this conversation the other day, and the one thing it took me a really long time to realize this, but people sometimes are disappointed in you because of what you're not giving them,
Yeah.
right? It's not
Mhm.
necessarily that you made the wrong choice, but their vision of you gets kind of cracked because you're not fulfilling their needs by
Mhm.
your actions.
Yep.
So if you know you're not getting to hurt anybody, and you're making a decision, and you know, and you're betting on yourself, or you love what you do, and you know that it's where your heart wants to go, then you'll be all right.
Mhm.
It's when you start kind of living for other people or what you think you should be. And I'm not saying chase dreams like I want to be like a runway model. Like Clint Eastwood said, a man's got to know his limitations, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you can't achieve dreams, right? Even the ones that seem slightly unrealistic. Just make sure you have that safety net there. That's so it's not an all or nothing bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got to walk out of the casino at some point with some chips in your hand.
It's so true. It's so true. Another good analogy. Um, Now Boeboe Creative. So you mentioned that date, 2014. So
Mm-hmm.
you're the founder of this company, right?
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about what you do for our last part of this conversation, what you offer and some plans for the future. Um, I do want to touch on the conversation we had at when we saw Wiggins in that park there.
Yeah.
But tell me about the company first.
So basically, it's a, or I am, it's a company that basically allows me to kind of draw, write, create IPs and content, also provide that and for other people, including publishing services.
Mhm.
So I self-publish books. I've published books for a couple of authors. I, when I do stunt work, it's through Boeboe. So it allows me to kind of do everything that I need to do. And
Mhm.
so I incorporated it in 2014, I think.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so that allows me to basically have it as an entity, and then I can work through it.
Okay. And you did stuff for you created images for comics and is it DC Comics? Hasbro? Like
Not with Bobo. That's
not
when
with
I
Bobo.
was. This
Mhm.
was way back when I was working with Draxel just as a freelancer, right? I
Okay.
guess technically I'm still a freelancer, but I have my own company,
Mhm.
right? And so what I'm using Bobo for now is when I'm creating a comic book with some partners called Atrium,
Okay.
right? So through Bobo, we would pay the or hire a colorist,
Mhm.
right? And so all the publishing would kind of go through Bobo. And Comics Asylum, which is the podcast as well as the entertainment site,
Mhm.
is partly run through Bobo. Um, and so when I did the work for the NHL, it's for a documentary called Ice Queens that
Okay.
Kwame that we were
Yeah.
speaking with earlier, Kwame Mason,
Yeah.
he was the director. Bobo did the artwork for it, and
Okay.
I did the artwork through Bobo for it.
Okay, I get that. I get that. So that DC stuff was before.
Yeah, that was before,
Yeah.
right?
So Bobo
Yeah.
now. And the podcast. So you started your podcast through Bobo?
Yeah, through Comics Asylum. So it's a Comics Asylum
Concept.
podcast.
Hmm.
And basically what it was PR companies would reach out to me and say, "Do you want to review or talk to any of the personalities that are creating these comics?" And I was like, "Sure." And the pandemic had kind of kicked in, and so you're stuck, in your house. You can't go outside,
Yeah.
but you can buy a microphone and a nice ring light.
Yeah.
And exactly, mine's here too.
Yeah.
And and get to talk to people. Like there was a way of having connections.
Hmm.
And the thing that I found to be, kind of like the best part of it was I got to, much like you're doing, get on the ground level for people who've done things and kind of where I want to get to,
Yeah.
find out what their journey was.
Mm.
Right. So the
Mhm.
questions I'd ask would be to kind of not only get what they, went through, but also to give me a little bit of information in terms of like, oh, so that's how it can be done.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so anyone who's watching the podcast could watch an interview and go, oh, so that was the thought process behind this.
Mhm.
Ah, I get a deeper meaning of the project. But then if they want to do it, they can follow that path or
Right.
take what they need out of that conversation to forge their own way.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm getting a lot from my guests. And one of the things I'm probably going to ask you too is for some inspiring words for someone that wants to give up on their dreams. But yeah, I know what you mean. And I've interviewed people from all different professions. It's crazy. I love learning about when I interviewed Nicole Holmes, and I'm like, oh, she has a Netflix show. Like, how'd that go? And that, she was in the USA pageant. How was that experience in interviewing comedians? And now you're my first real interview with someone in that art world, like drawing and things like that. So I'm trying to dabble into everything and learn. And it's crazy when I don't know. Like, remember I said, how do I ask this question?
Right.
So I'm being vulnerable too in my podcast where sometimes I
It's
hear names or things I don't know what people are talking about, but I'm learning. And if I don't know how to ask a question, I'll be humble and say, okay, what does that mean? And how do I ask this, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a perfect way to approach it.
Hmm.
Um, Also to people can kind of tell when you're not authentic. So
Yeah.
and people like to know that you're vulnerable
Hmm.
and humble enough to ask, right? Because they might be inquiring as well too,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so if you can give them that kind of knowledge through your question,
Hmm.
you've succeeded 2, 3 times in getting across the message that you want.
Amazing. So before we started recording, you were telling me how many podcasts you did. So how many episodes have you completed in the podcast? And you want to start it up again, right?
Yeah, I'm currently, I think we're on 14 or 15.
Yeah.
And when I kickstart the comic that I mentioned earlier called Atrium, we're going to kickstart it in August,
Hmm.
and hopefully have a fall release after everything's fulfilled. I want to get back and because I'll have time to do that. And I'm currently
Right.
working on a graphic novel, which is
Hmm.
taking up a lot of time, for some writers out west. And
Hmm.
so I want to get back into that because it's just great to connect
Yeah.
to everyone because everyone's journey, as similar as you may think it might be, is completely different because they're
Hmm.
they're starting from a different place and their fears or whatever would be completely different. Um, and sometimes people know what they want from jump, and
Yeah.
then a lot of times people don't know what they want until you know you're halfway through your trip.
Yeah.
Um, some of us know from the time they were before post-secondary education or in high school or whatever, I want to do this, and
Hmm.
they're able to go do it. And
Yeah.
there's some people that get through like halfway through post-secondary and they're like, oh my god, I hate this.
It's
But
crazy.
then
Well, my daughter made it all the way to university and she got her psych degree, but
right,
she knew that's not what she wanted to do, man. But she finished her psych degree, and now, as I told you before, she got
yeah,
into vet college.
that's
So
awesome.
she realized, and the way she realized that though was when we lost our first dog,
Right.
and we were trying to save her. It was so much money, but we didn't care about the money. We're like, okay, what do we have to do? But then it comes to a point where you have to make that decision. But the care that the vet took in explaining everything to us, I think that sparked something in my daughter. And then she had the
Yeah.
conversation with us about switching careers.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think I got this from a host teacher when I was in teachers college. So usually what happens is you go for like a few weeks at a school off campus, and you show up there every day, so you're not in class,
Mhm.
and sometimes you'll shadow and sometimes you'll teach lessons. And I remember I had brought some of my artwork into the class, and he had asked me, so do you want to do art, right? And his line was, sometimes you don't want to do things that you love as a job because you want an escape,
Yeah.
right? But sometimes you do. Sometimes you want to have the thing that you love be your job. Because the thing about a job, it's a grind,
Yeah.
right? Like I loved teaching, but it was a grind. I
Hmm.
love drawing. Parts of it is a grind,
Hmm.
right? But if you don't have a love for it, then you can't get through the points where it's like, this project is stalling, or I have to figure out something, or the people I'm working with aren't the best,
Hmm.
right? You got to have a passion for it, right? And I guess that goes back to Colby saying you got to dribble every day, got to practice every day, 2-3 hours every day.
Hmm.
If you don't love it, you're not going to do it. Like if you don't love sit ups, I can guarantee you're not doing them every day.
Yeah. So true. So true. Oh man. Okay. Now the last thing is, um, I didn't see you for a while, but Andrew Wiggins was supposed to come to the park there and then,
Mm-hmm.
bring his trophy for the championship. And I didn't even know you were going to be there, but I seen you. And when we were talking, you said you retired from teaching now. You have all the stuff you're working on, but what I didn't know you were working on too. Are you making a movie? So is this what you were talking about too? Let me know what you're talking about, filming, production, and your stunt work. Tell me what you do.
So this happened. It was just something I guess you can say I fell into stunt work. Um, oh goodness, it was Easter.
Okay.
It was Easter pre-pandemic, and because it was Easter, they needed some people to go in and do some work for some extra work, and so he called me, a guy named Paul, and he called me, and we were on set, and I had fun, and then Paul and I we kind of connected because he likes comics, and we started chatting, and then I'd done some work with him on subsequent projects. And then he was like, "We're making a movie. We're gonna do an independent film. Would you like to be a part of it?"
Hmm.
So he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it." I said, "I know nothing about film, Paul. I don't, just don't worry about it. It'll be good." And so I was able to be on the production, and I had a great time. I learned a lot. Um, saw how I guess the sausage is made. Um, contributed a lot more than I thought I would,
Hmm.
and it kind of fueled my fire to be even more creative and expand whatever my knowledge base is. Because the one thing that I realized is, especially starting late and not going through traditional education,
Hmm.
you kind of don't know what you don't know, right? But you realize how connected everything is. So storytelling is still storytelling when you think about it.
Hmm.
So what I learned on that film, whether it was behind the scenes or helping out with storyboards, um, has helped me immeasurably when it comes to my own stuff, right? And it's all just kind of like scaffolding, right? It's like you're building a Jenga tower
Yeah.
as high as you can, and you take what I learned in teaching, which is like organization, people skills, even though they're really short, and then you transfer that to being on a film set, which is people skills and organization in another way.
Yeah.
I took my art background, which would help me then when I'm looking at what the director is doing, and just ask questions, right?
Hmm.
So between takes, you say, so, ask a question about, a shot, or have a suggestion, throw it out there, see what they say, because they have a load of experience in an art form that you have none, other than, as a buddy of mine said, well, you've watched enough television, you know what's going on. I go, okay, yes. And I do reviews, so I understand certain aspects of it, but there are
Hmm.
other aspects I don't know.
Hmm.
So I would talk to the DOP, figure out what lens they're using and why, right? And all that kind of stuff. And then also the jigsaw puzzle nature of film. So where you have to have continuity be a big thing because you're not necessarily filming everything on one day, right? It
Right.
might
Right.
be segmented based on schedules,
Yeah.
right? And that's one of the biggest things was like the business and logistical aspect of
Hmm.
film.
Hmm.
But I love it. Like the long days, working with a whole bunch of people, the friendships you strike up. It's just great.
Amazing, man. You see, I wish when I was younger, I wish I knew because I like this aspect of life, like entertainment. I like meeting people. I like conversating. I like writing stories. I actually write stories in my head a lot. I was never I tell some people on my podcast, I believe I have some form of dyslexia. I hate reading
Right.
because I look at the book, I jumble up words. It's hard for me to like pay attention to. So I'm more of a visual person, like watching
Right.
movies. But I like creating stories, and that's how I created my jokes. People don't, a lot of people don't know that. They thought I wrote my jokes. I make them up in my head and then I recite them.
Nice.
So I'd have a microphone, I have a mirror, and I'd practice it that way. And I watch how I'm looking, and because I want the right expression at the right time. And that's how I would practice. And I'd memorize my joke. And I
You're a
don't have written.
storyteller. You're a
Yeah.
storyteller. When you're telling a joke,
Yeah.
you're telling a story, right? But the aim is not only to teach, but to make someone bust out laughing,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so you're doing the same thing. And it's kind of like, old school artists draw pencil paper, right?
Mhm.
New school artists draw on a something called a Cintiq, right? Which is like a monitor.
All
And
right. Yeah.
so it's all digital, but you're still translating something from your mind to something that is a visual or auditory medium to
Yeah.
tell a story to elicit a reaction,
So true. Yeah.
right? That's all we're doing.
Mhm. Yeah, man. Okay. This has been a great podcast. I think we
I had a
broke the
great time.
record. I think we broke the record. I think my longest one was an hour and a half, and then I
Uh-huh.
come close with a couple, but I think we broke it. The last thing we're
Oh
gonna do,
wow,
yeah,
we went pretty. It was good, but it didn't seem like it.
yeah, I
It was
know.
good. This is
Conversation.
fantastic. I had a great time.
It's like Joe Rogan's podcast have hours, man, and then they
Yeah,
just have great conversation. But yeah, that's where I want to take this. Okay, now last thing we're gonna do before the donations is you tell me which one you want me to read out. This is the Star Scorpio question. The Blue Jays or the Raptors?
let's go with the Raptors.
What is one of the most memorable moments of your life? And I knew this question would come up, but I don't know what you're going to say though.
Oh wow. Hmm. There's a lot. There's a lot. Like, and I'm gonna say it's kind of weird because I'm gonna say maybe I don't think I have one, but I'll mention a whole bunch, and it's for various reasons. Um, Probably the birth of my daughter and watching her grow, my daughter Olivia,
Mhm.
and anyone who knows me knows where I'm going with this. I was lucky enough to watch the Montreal Canadiens win a Stanley Cup
Oh,
in
wow.
Montreal in '93.
Wow.
I think, like, I just think of like, because everyone has different aspects of their life, right? And they're different milestones.
Mhm.
And when you think of things that you don't necessarily get to share on a wide, in a wide way, so it's kind of like, when you have kids, that's you and your wife or your partner, whatever, family. When you see an event like that and you're there live, it's you and the 20,000 people or 18,000 people that were there. When you win an award, it's a culmination of a lot of hard work and achievement and all the support of the people that helped get you there. But those two, just off the top of my head,
Mhm.
are the ones where it's like, as a being a lifelong Habs fan, and then as a young kid watching them win in the building, and then being out on the streets partying with an entire city,
Yeah.
that's one thing. And then the older me is being a dad
Mhm.
and watching my daughter be born, and that miracle of life, it just changes everything.
Great.
Changes everything.
Thanks for sharing. There's no rules to this. I've had
No.
people answer different ways too, and I'm like, yep, there's no rules to this. Okay, as you know, as everyone knows, I do this to give back, and I give to charities. So this season 7, I am giving to Claus, Kawartha Lakes Animal Wellness Society, the Fundraiser Warriors, 4 little boys doing great things, and Make-A-Wish Foundation. So by your choice, I'll find out who I'm donating to today.
Sure.
What do you want me to pop? The right, the middle, or the left?
Let's go down the middle.
Season 7, episode 6. Star Scorpio would be donating to oh my gosh. I think it's the first time this season. I don't know. Pull it back. Claus.
Nice.
Kawartha Lakes Animal Wellness Society. Anything for the animals. I love donating.
Excellent.
To that cause. All right, Steve. Thanks for coming out today. Let the people know where they can find you.
You can find me on @SteveBynoe Art on Instagram. You can find me at Comics Asylum, www.comicsasylum.com on the web, and Boeboe Creative. And I think I'm actually on Twitter as well too. So you might see some comic book related, movie related, and sports related musings on Twitter.
Amazing. All right. Thanks for coming out.
Thanks for having me. Had a blast.
Yes, anytime. Real Talk with Star Scorpio, season 7, and we out.